Hello, this has worked well so far. All good.
Hello. Okay, let me make you a co-host.
Ah, yes, correct.
All right, step one done.
It was funny because I switched over to being myself instead of Oars. I couldn't then open a meeting that I had this afternoon without switching back. But I think I've mastered this now.
I'm glad we went through that today because now it should be a piece of cake. Maybe I speak too soon, but
no, I think we understand it now.
Do you want me to start letting the board members in early?
Yes, that would be great. Yes, Adam.
I sent you the new graph via email just now.
Okay.
Just on the off chance that you can just grab the graph itself and paste it right in on top of the other one.
I can
didn't
do that
realize
for
the
you.
meeting doesn't start till 7. I thought when I called you, I thought we've got 10 minutes. This will never work.
Do you want to do that, Sarah?
If you put it onto the Canva slide, that's why I downloaded the PDF from, because it looked nicer downloaded directly from Canva. Then I can download it and resend it.
I think I can pop it on. I mean, honestly, I don't think it matters, but I can pop it on. I don't know.
Or you can email it to me and I can do it either way.
Yeah, it's some kind of a weird image that's embedded in the email. So,
Let me send you the whole spreadsheet then.
I think that's the easier way to do it, actually.
Is it just the pie charts need updating, or does the table need
It's just
updating
one
too?
chart. One chart.
Okay.
I'll keep an eye on the waiting room while you're doing that.
Okay. I'm admitting people on Kindful as I go, but I'm only letting in board members right now.
Oh, you have a different way of doing it through Kindful?
So I can anyone that's registered, I can check them off in Kindful as actually attended, so I can see who registered versus who actually attended as well.
That's really good. So I don't want to mess that up. I won't admit anyone.
Okay. But yeah, I'm only admitting board members and staff at the moment.
That sounds fine.
And then I will move on to the others shortly.
Yeah,
I'll admit Chad when he turns up as well.
Hello. Did I hear we were making a slight change in the pie charts?
Yes, Adam is adding stewardship in, which got obscured in a previous edition.
Okay.
That's all. It's only 8%, but it didn't appear in the programs.
Oh, that's right. It doesn't, does it?
No, it's very strange. It's like the data selection got moved up one row and missed it, even though it was there originally. It probably happened while I was trying to format the pie chart. I probably grabbed something and it slid. Who knows?
Did you email it through to me, Adam?
I'm working on sending it now.
Oh, okay.
Wait, there's something funny in it, Adam. You've got the under ecological restoration, you have the actual number.
Oh God, are you kidding me?
I'm not.
Oh, okay, hang on. Oh, for God's sake.
Nothing like the last minute scramble.
Called a charrette architecture.
Yeah, and then when I say don't include that, it includes it anyway. Can I make it go away?
We can admit Ingeborg.
Yep, he's coming in now.
Here she comes. Okay, Adam just sent it to us. There you go. Cool.
Yeah, but it's going to have the dollar value on that one square, and I can't make it go away. I hate these slides.
Don't worry about it, guys. If it doesn't make it through, we will survive.
What are you
Can
trying
we
to
get
make
out the whiteout and just white out over the top?
Yeah, white it out. They must have that function.
What are you trying to make go away, Adam?
Under ecological restoration and climate resiliency, the shout out text box, it has the dollar value. Just in that one text
I see
box.
18%. I don't see dollar value.
Oh, then you're fine. Go for it.
Great, good.
Hi,
I see
Ingeborg.
16%.
It
That's
must be a
odd.
function of just that you're working on it, Adam.
It might be.
Yeah. And do
Check-
you have
check
all
to see
5
that all your
categories, Sarah?
percentages on the program and services add up to 100%. I just added them in the old version, and yeah, we're missing a few percent there. Revenue is fine.
I still don't see stewardship on the pie chart though. This looks like exactly the same pie chart as is on the slides.
Oh, so it sent you the non-revised version. Great, okay. Well,
Oh, the fun.
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. Oh, the fun. Okay.
so I can't see the slides that you guys are looking at. I'm looking at the financial data that I have in front of me. Mr. Fitzgerald, are you saying that the percentages for the functional expenses are not 70, 26, and 4?
I'm looking at the programs and services from the printout, and you've got 47% river science, 7% advocacy. That gets us to 54%. And then we've got 18%.
Yeah, let me stop you. Let me stop you
Restoration,
right there.
resiliency. That
Yeah,
gets
let me
us
stop you.
to
That's what, that's,
72%. Oh, no, I guess the education outreach is 28%, so maybe that's okay.
well, Paul, that's what we're just discussing, that it's missing a piece. It's missing stewardship.
Okay, so when the stewardship comes in, all those other percentages are going to change slightly.
Yes. Okay, let me try resending this again, Sarah.
Okay.
You. Good job.
Hi, Ingeborg. Do you have any questions about how it all goes? Because it's up to you to sort of tell people at the beginning. We'll be recording the meeting. We'll be voting by voice vote, all that stuff. Are you good with that?
I can do that. I was very, very happy that you wrote it all out for me.
Well,
then
and Pam
on
and I went through hers. We modified it. We just changed things a tiny bit. But because what if someone does have a nomination from the floor? What do we do then? It was a really good question. So we figured out, and I talked with Alan too, we figured out how to handle it if it happens. It never does, but who knows, right? So we can end up with
and for the agenda, I wrote down what the agenda was in 3 or 4 words, so I wouldn't blow that while I was explaining that. So I'm all good, thank you.
And Sarah's the webmeister, no, Zoom meister. And behind the scenes will hopefully help us with, make sure people get in and out and all that kind of thing.
Okay, Sarah, try it again. I just sent it again.
Okay.
It is going to have the dollar value on one tag item for some odd reason.
Okay, come on through. Oh, Bob Brown, let me put him in.
Oh, huh. That looks better. That's got them all.
Okay, let's see.
You're not really sitting in your office, are you? With as the sun goes down, your sun doesn't go down, so that's a little suspicious.
Roger, you're on mute.
Is he talking or
Thank you,
chewing?
Bob. I didn't realize. Thank you. But I'll go back on mute.
Hey, Roger,
Oh, yes.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, shoot.
If somebody says, can somebody make a motion like to accept the minutes? Can you make that motion?
Oh, you want me to make the motion?
Yeah, or second it. Like, I just don't want there to be like a gaping silence.
Oh, I will absolutely second it. And if you want me to make the motion, I will make the motion. Whatever you want.
Okay, you get the feel of the room. if
If,
that's.
if
needed.
nobody makes it for 5 seconds, then I will make the motion.
Thank you. Perfect. You're our backup man. Excellent.
I think I can do that.
Everybody has a role around here.
I just remembered, I'm gonna get a microphone because if I sit back like this, you can't hear me, right?
We can hear you, just not well.
But it's a lot better like this.
Yeah, it is better, but
Yeah, I'm gonna get a microphone.
okay. Up to you.
Right, let's see. I'm almost ready to re-download. So it was just just the pie chart that needed updating, right?
Just the one for programs and services.
Yeah, okay. Re-download and then I'll send the PDF over to you, Alison.
Okay.
So hopefully coming your way in a moment.
The good thing with the PDF is it doesn't shift all my screens over to Zoom to.
Yeah, it is nice to do it like that.
It's really nice. I can just click advance through it.
Now I'll start letting people in soonish.
Great.
Hey, Heather, while I have you here, I haven't heard back from the Eagle Scout we talked about. So, and I'm afraid I might have missed an email from you somewhere. So if we need to talk, let me know.
I just prompted him today
Terrific.
I reached out to him. I said, did you connect with Roger? He
Terrific.
only really answers me at night, so I assume I'll get an email tonight.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, let's have a look.
Sarah, you emailed it, yeah?
I'm sending it in Teams because that's the easiest way
It is
to
faster.
get it to you because of the size of it. So it's coming in a second.
Okay, super. Adam, I'm learning Teams so fast.
It's just uploading to Teams and then it should
That's
be coming
awesome.
your way. And then I'm gonna start letting people in very soon.
Sounds fine.
So you guys have already moved over to Teams?
We're,
Well, kind of.
it's an evolutionary process. Okay, it just came in.
All right, can I start letting people in?
Yes.
Perfect. They shall start coming soon.
Sarah, are you counting the number of people that are going to be signed on?
I am, but I need to concentrate on letting people in for a second. Sorry, I won't be answering questions just for a minute. Let me just get people.
Pam, she can keep, as she lets them in, she can tick them off so we know who has come in, who have registered through the website.
Thank you.
Skies except for the smoke or fog or smog or fog, whatever it's called. A lot of bushes with the white flowers on them now. Native plants. Nice to see some familiar faces and names. How wonderful. Should really have some music.
This would be the time for that obligatory Love That Dirty Water song.
It would.
Allison, by my count, we have a quorum of we have 25 members present.
Good, thank you.
Allison, you missed the Mass Rivers meeting today.
You know what? I had this annual meeting tonight, so I
That's what
I had to
figured.
prioritize.
Yes.
I hope
You
it was
missed-
good. I'm sure it was.
Yeah, it was good. We have all new people at DEP.
I sure
You
did.
missed my very confusing short complaint about how the river DEP is dealing with nutrients.
Well,
I'm not having a good day describing things today. So
I'll expect a personal description in due course.
yes,
Good.
sure.
Well, it's 7:05 and we've got a lot of people here, which is really exciting. So I'm going to open the meeting and welcome everyone to the 37th annual meeting. I'm Ingeborg Hegeman. I'm the current president of ORS. And tonight, obviously, this is a Zoom meeting. We are recording this meeting, so I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. Please keep yourself muted. Except when we're asking for a motion, then please vote by voice. So I think we can all hear you. And when we have Q&A, raise your hand either on the screen or by waving into your camera, and we'll try to catch you. And you can also put comments or questions in the chat, which if you put your cursor down at the bottom, you'll see a little bubble that says chat, and you can chat. We had some conversation on the side there. So the quick review of the agenda, this is our annual business meeting. We'll be looking at financials. We'll be doing our election of the board, and we'll have the executive director's report. And then we have a wonderful guest speaker tonight, Chad Sumner, who will be speaking to us about some very cool restoration projects. Pam Rockwell identified that we do have a quorum, so I'm going to officially call this meeting to order and ask Jeff to cover the minutes from last week.
Last year.
Year.
Thank you, Ingeborg. And thanks everyone for attending tonight. It's great to see everybody here. I'm Jeff Collins, Vice President of the Board at ORS, and I'm going to ask you to vote to approve the minutes of last year's annual meeting. So the meeting minutes, we're going to paste a link to them, which would be hard to review as we operate here, but if folks want to refer to them, and I'd ask for a voice vote, yes for affirmative, no for decline, or abstain for abstain. So if folks would like to vote, if you want to take 2 seconds to unmute yourselves. And I'd ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the annual meeting of June 27th, 2022.
So moved.
Great, thank you. And seconded?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, would all those in favor say yes?
Yes.
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 All those opposed say no. And anyone who cares to abstain can say abstain. Great. I think the minutes are approved. Thank you all.
Okay, can we have the PowerPoint, please? Here we go. So these are our financial highlights for 2022. We're pleased to say that the ORS is in good financial health. We came out of the pandemic without any significant damage. 2022 was a year of transition. We had some staff turnover, and you'll see that in the increase in general and administration for the year. That's due to Julia's retirement and some the additional staffing needed to replace her. We also had significant groundwork laid for ecological and climate resilience projects, and that primarily means dam removal projects, as well as there are some other large projects, but the dam removal is obviously the major item. We've been pleased by membership support over the years, and we're very grateful that you've continued to carry the organization. Each year, the members have supported almost 50% of the revenue for the organization, and this last year it was 53%. So that was excellent. Keep up the good work, and we hope we can do new and amazing things in the coming year. If there aren't any questions, I'll turn it over to Pam for the nominations.
So I'm Pam Rockwell. I'm the clerk for the nominating committee, and I'm here to present nominations for new and returning board members. We're going to be using a voice vote to elect our board members. The nominating committee recommends a slate of 1 new director and 3 returning directors for 3-year terms. Our new nominee is Bob Brown of Maynard, and our nominees for re-election are Ingeborg Hageman of Stowe, Jeff Collins from Concord, and Kirk Doggett from Acton. And the biographies for our nominees are available on the website where you registered. Are there any additional nominations for board members from the floor? If you have an additional nomination, could you please unmute your microphone and say something? All right, so hearing no more nominations, I'd like to ask for a motion to elect the slate recommended by the nominating committee.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, I hear a motion and a second. So if you're a member of ORS and you want to vote, please unmute your microphone. All those in favor, please say yes.
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 All those opposed, please say no. And all those who wish to abstain, please say abstain. And the slate of directors is approved. Thank you. Our clerk, Susan MacArthur, is retiring from the board, and we want to thank her for her great service to our mission. And don't forget to mute your microphone again. And we're on to Allison to give us her executive director's report. Thank you. Allison, are you muted?
You're muted, Allison.
Here we go. Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's wonderful to see you, some old friends, some new friends. And so I wanted to take you through a very rapid sort of drone-like spin over our last year and a bit into the current year that's already started. So I think most of you know our watershed and where we sit in our Commonwealth. And let's get this so it advances. There we go. Our board of directors are a wonderful group of people. This picture includes staff as well, but this was taken at our last retreat, which was just about a month ago, at which we reviewed our new strategic plan and how we were doing on it. And I have to say that this board is a wonderful, energetic, creative, and incredibly dedicated and hardworking board. So we thank them very much for being with us on this journey. We have a staff team. Back in 2022, we were down to briefly to 2 people, which was a little scary. And then we recruited the 3 people on the right-hand side, Heather Conkerton, Adam Nolde, and Sarah Kwan. And we're just so excited to be working, all of us in the office. There's a great energy, exciting work happening. And this was our spring paddle, again, about a month ago. And this summer, we're going to welcome our summer education coordinator, who will be helping with the WaterWise workshops, our education program for children. I wanted to give a special thanks to our many, many supporters, our members and friends, of course. And then there are also a lot of community organizations, state agencies who contribute to our work through restricted grants and through contributions. Also, our municipalities, several of them make a voluntary contribution to our water quality program, for which we're very grateful. And then also local businesses, both corporate and small businesses. We really appreciate their support for so much of what we do. And when we have an event, there's a lot of in-kind donation, and we appreciate that too. So it's just, these are the things that keep us going. So I wanted to just give a very quick overview of, for those of you who don't know, we were founded in 1986. And since then, we really initially focused on water quality. That was the terrible pollution of the Assabet River was the driving force for the organization for the Assabet River to be founded. And then we developed our water quality monitoring program, fought pretty hard on some wastewater discharge permits, and made a lot of progress. So it would take about 3 more slides of rivers to get to today. So we're not going to do that, but I'll say that our goal remains really the same as it was back then, which is, in the terms of the Clean Water Act, rivers that are clean enough for fishing and swimming. And to that, we add accessible to all people. So that is our mission. It remains our mission. And we've made a lot of progress. So I'll just run quickly through our programs. I want to do it so that we get really to our presentation. So I'll be quite quick, but we can post this online. So if anybody wants to see more of it, they can. But at any rate, our many years of water quality monitoring continues under Ben Wetherill, our water quality scientist. Volunteers go out in the field collecting 222 samples in 2022. And that's published. Ben analyzes it and publishes it in a water quality report that we provide to our communities and to the regulators and to you. He also has special programs on tracking down bacteria using various methods and working with the communities that have bacteria problems in the river or their streams. He's started a program looking at fluoride in the streams. Our rivers are getting saltier in this state. That is not good for the wildlife. And we need to try to figure out why and how that's happening. And our volunteers have been very involved in that. Also, water temperatures. We know that our summers are getting hotter, heat waves, and drier. And so we are now monitoring the impacts of some dams, monitoring water upstream of the dam and downstream so that we can detect changes if that dam is removed. And we can also see how significant the impact of that dam is. We also are continuing to work with on phosphorus. A hotspot is the Hop Brook in Sudbury. And so we're working closely with the Hop Brook Protection Association to figure out where that's coming from and clear it up. And then lastly, because Ben is really good at analyzing data, he notices where there are problems and he has identified where there are problems in reporting and also where there are violations of permits. So we're really always able to stay right on top of that. Our new program over the last couple of years has been really to, and this is in line with our strategic plan, is to focus on the ground restoration of ecological functions. And that is part of building climate resiliency overall. So we have 2 dam removal projects that we are the project manager for, one in Billerica and one in Berlin. One is on the major Concord River, as you can see in that picture, it's a big river. And the other one is on North Brook, which is a small cold water stream. We also have a technical advisory committee of experts who are advising us on how to prioritize of the 190 some dams in our watershed. Where do we start? And which ones may be suitable for removal, which ones may be just suitable for restoring fish passage, how to tackle that in a really well-grounded scientific way that then we can work with communities and owners to find out what is the best course of action. And we have our Climate Resiliency Coalition that has been meeting and is especially going to be helping our communities with how to finance stormwater management, which is an ongoing issue. And we also just like to get water back into the ground. So just an example of a small project in Marlborough Senior Center of a rain garden that we're building. Policy advocacy, that's always been one of our calling cards, is to get a seat at the table. By having good data, we have a good basis to say what might work in terms of solutions. I wish this picture was from 2022, but it was not, as from March 2020. And so it was the last time we were actually in Washington, but it's kind of emblematic of what we aim to do. But instead we've been meeting through Zoom, of course, through legislative breakfasts, one-on-ones with our federal legislators, staff, and locally, lobby for the Rivers Day and lobbying for funding for our wild and scenic rivers. We've been also pushing for more money to get to our municipalities through the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness funding by the state to increase the funding in the Environmental Bond Bill. That's a collaboration with Mass Municipal Association and other organizations. We try to keep on top of PFAS, which is a concern to everybody, people with their own private wells, people with municipal water supplies, and now more recently about the actual fish in our ponds and lakes, as well as the rivers that are contaminated with PFAS. So we try to keep people informed. We try to help pushing forward the useful legislation on that. And the drought, the same thing. keeping people informed. What's up with the drought? What's the latest declaration? What does it mean? And of course, pushing for the good legislation proposed by Senator Eldridge. We hope to get it over the line this legislative session to rationalize our drought response. And the last thing I'll mention is still, we will never stop thinking about wastewater. It's somehow in our DNA. We pushed and got really good concessions on a permit for the that EPA had proposed to streamline their permitting, and that will actually help reduce their workload, but also keep the high standards that we have fought for so long. So also the thing you may notice most about us is outreach, education, and recreation, because you may be getting Otter News, which we're thrilled. That is, I have to say, that's 2023, not 2022, but I can't resist talking about it because it's been such a great thing that's been set up by Sarah Kwan, our development director, and that is trying to get information to you in an interesting form every month. And we've updated our river maps. Lots of new items have been added by our communities all along the rivers, new put-ins and landings and trails. We've had our film festival in person in Maynard for 2 years again now, which is exciting, and I'm so glad to see quite a lot of you there. And we will continue with our WaterWise workshops through thick and thin with the Boys and Girls Clubs for children who wouldn't otherwise get hands-on environmental education out in the field. And we hope at this time next year, we may be able to announce a new website. And then stewardship, which along with ecological restoration is the work of Heather Conkerton, our ecological restoration coordinator. I will just mention our focus on moving our water chestnut management from a paid summer staff position to volunteers, because it's actually being managed that well that it can be done by volunteers. We've had a wonderful Eagle Scout, Finn Barrett, who we've been working with to put up signs that will educate people and help them use. On the right, you'll see our app that Ben developed so that people can report water chestnut that they've pulled or that they've seen, to really help us keep track of what we're doing and find out where the problems are. So I will end here with I wanted to just mention that in addition to these substantive program areas, ORS has also been updating its systems for managing our databases, for managing our finances, all those things that are really, this team has been doing great work. Adam Nolde, our finance manager. And so you may see us in it may look slightly different. It's working really well, but our office, now that we're all in it, there's 5 of us, 6 of us in the summer, we need to make sure that everything works really smoothly and we communicate really well. So we've been working on that all spring. I think we're in a really good place. Please help us continue that good work by donating, and certainly by joining if you're not a member already, and absolutely by volunteering. There's a lot of fun things to do at ORS, and it's a really meaningful way to be engaged with our rivers, whether it's through advocacy, whether it's through water quality sampling or water chestnut, or helping in the office or with events, whatever suits your interest, we have things that you can do. So with that, I'd like to thank you. You probably already know our website, but there it is. Email us, call us. We'd love to be involved with you. And if you have questions also, feel free to be in touch or drop by. So that ends my presentation. And at this point, I would like to move over to our presenter. And I'd like to introduce Chad Sumner. Chad is, we first learned about Chad because Ben went on a field trip looking at dam removal in Rhode Island, and he met Chad there, and it was so fascinating. He came back completely interested in dam removal. kind of why we went. And it was really exciting to hear about it. And then Chad is now also serving on our technical advisory committee, looking at how to prioritize dam removal. So we just thought he was the guy to invite to speak with you. And we also heard that he's just is great at this. So I want to introduce Chad Sumner, who's the co-founder and managing principal of Sumco Eco Contracting. It's a construction firm focused on ecological and environmental improvement projects in northeastern US. His experience is right around here. He's been working in this region for 20 years, and his focus is on how to address diverse ecological, environmental, and infrastructure challenges posed by our changing climate, which is exactly where we're at too. So with no further ado, I would like to invite Chad to say hello and share his screen and start rolling.
And off we go. Yeah, thank you, Allison. And thank you to Ben as well, who found me traipsing around Rhode Island and thought it would be a good idea to come out and talk to you folks for a little bit. I know a number of the folks on here, and it's truly my pleasure to talk through some of the stuff that we've been deploying and employing to manage all manner of river restoration projects in the Northeast here. I think ORS is a phenomenal organization, and really where we've seen a lot of success in the context of these types of efforts is watershed scale approaches to things. There's examples of several watersheds, whether it's Townbrook in Plymouth or the Woodpawcatuck River watershed, which is where I met Ben down in Rhode Island, where there's a series of dams and blockages and impediments to fish and flow and sediments and everything else. And really by taking that watershed scale, there's scale of organization, there's scale of interest, there's scale of funding. And so, yeah, I'm excited to be here to talk through some of what we've seen there. So let me get the share going. I'll give you the whole screen and we'll see what we can end up looking at here. So tell me if I'm getting it right. When we get the presentation up, that's always the moment. Do we have a
looking good
cover sheet?
We got it.
All right, off and running then. For some additional context, I've been working with dam removal and river restoration projects since around the time Mass Riverways joined up with the Wetland Restoration and Banking Program to form DER, and Massachusetts got serious about trying to take out dams to begin with. It's been an interesting evolution to see how the concept initially was what you want to take out a dam to something that we're talking about broadly. And through that purview and the way I ended up meeting up with Ben was through the Environmental Business Council. I'm a member of the Dams Management Committee there, and there's been a lot of focus on various management and removal restoration programs within that. So initially, a lot of the work and a lot of the focus, or a lot of the preference maybe from the choir that I'm speaking to here, is to get the dams out of the way so the rivers can do their things. But so that's been the focus of a lot of dam management for ecological benefit over the years. So I just wanted to start with where we'd like to go in a lot of cases, which is in the removals. And this is starting up in Curtis Pond. This is in Middleton, so not too far from where we're operating here. And just was going to breeze through a few quick before and afters to show how simple it really is. I mean, we're talking about a very small work area here. You're in, you're out. Wapping Road down in Kingston, Mass was the first on the Jones River watershed that came out. There's been some subsequent ones. Barrier to no barrier to growing in to full vegetation within 5 years. It's a nice transition. And these are the types of projects that we've become accustomed to seeing when we're looking at dam removal projects. Amethyst Brook was one that was very early in the dam removal movement out in Pelham, Massachusetts. The great irony in the permitting and cost of this project was that taking out the dam was, as is the case in many, was a fraction of the cost of the project. But as a testament to how far regulatory adoption and means and methods and precedents has come, there was a substantive water control program associated with this, with turbidity monitoring and erosion controls and everything else. And the net of it was, once we took all those out of the way, one of the objectives of the project was to release 8,000 yards of sediment downstream. So Those types of things are that irony doesn't happen quite as often, but this is a project that always resonates in that respect. So the dam comes out and the sediment starts moving, so much so that 300 yards upstream of this location, the head cut from that sediment removal revealed a dam from the 1700s. That was a timber crib dam, and they had to get a new permit to go back and take that out with PAL and everybody else associated. So never know what you find when you start getting into those impoundments. But then again, the restoration comes back, vegetation comes back. Another one, just traditional removal, part of the Eel River Headwaters project down in Plymouth, Massachusetts. All of these structures will start to look familiar both to themselves as well as probably a lot of what you see in the watershed that ORS gets involved with. But dam remove, pedestrian access, river doing its thing. Great dam up in Exeter. This is one that has translated to some interest within the Ipswich River Watershed Association as a proxy for some of what they're trying to do in the downtown mill dam removal in Ipswich. But again, dam is out, everything's stabilized, and we're moving on. Columbia Dam, and we're going to come back around to this one. This gets into the larger scale of things. Down in New Jersey, substantial dam to river within a season. This one, you'll see some pictures potentially later, removed in the wet. So nothing, no bypass, no nothing, just go in and take the dam out. So these are the traditional removals. What we had the opportunity to do in Rhode Island with Ben in that EBC program was a series of 7 passage projects. That was very much in the Wood-Pawcatuck River watershed, moving fish through the system. And so within a 30-minute stretch from end to end, we had 7 different passages. And so that's really, I think, what keyed in on what his interest was in translating through to the organization to look at. So we've looked at this standard dam removals, but what do we do when removal is not an option? Any manner of reasons, and each one of the examples that I've got here is motivated by something a little bit differently. But there is a lot that you can do. Generally translates to some version of head pond. These dams have been here in many cases generations longer than we have. Infrastructure got built around them, resource areas developed around them that were not there in the native river situation that we need to account for when we're looking at whatever motivating factor might be, whether it's fish passage or water quality or anything along those lines. So when removal is not an option, there's a few things that we've looked at or implemented with the benefit of our partners, who could be the owner, the engineers. Many cases, if you look at the partner list on these projects, there might be 30 listings of organizations and folks involved because it takes a lot to make these happen. So first one we'll look at is the rock ramp fishways, and this is one that we looked at down at Kenyon Mills in Richmond, Rhode Island. This is the 2 before pictures. So what's notable about the project in the top left is really what motivated this project to become what it was. So low head dam, hazards, fish passage impediments. On the right was what we got to see when we went for the pre-bid meeting, when there were some really good flows going, and they tend to be more intimidating. But in the top left picture, that square structure next to the truck is a pump house, and that pump house draws from that head pond and provides fire suppression to the entire mill building across the street from it. They are dealing with textiles and chemicals and all manner of things. There's no alternative water supply to that. So while they did want to pass fish through this impediment, there was no option to remove the dam and allow natural river processes to take place. So the design for this one was to remove that dam, but install a permanent grade control structure. Originally designed as sheet piles that were going to go across the river. We had nice boring samples to show us what the subsurface looked like, and sheet piles seemed like a really good idea. They were all in the parking lot where the truck's sitting and not where the dam is. So the first pile went in where the dam is, and lo and behold, there was bedrock right there. So there was a new design that got constructed, but from the standpoint of what this project was intended to look like, on the left side of the picture there is the access road, and the dam was immediately upstream of that. So in this case, we did have to manage water. That dark line around the top was a bypass channel that we constructed in line to allow the water to go around the work area. So this is early on in establishing the access. And the concept there was to develop a series of cross veins and a rock ramp fishway was what was coined for this. So a series of very specifically prescribed elevations of boulders and pools with rock walls that allows that drop from the crest of the dam where it initially was to work its way down even below base flow in the tailwater area to allow fish to pass up through there. And it's easier to see once we have water reintroduced to the system, but that's what the finished product ends up looking like. So you can see some of the boulders placed there. The picture on the right is where we have reasonably high water, so there's water flowing over the entire structure. The picture on the left, you can see gaps between the boulders, and this was engineered with fluvial geomorphologists to the extent of those gaps between the boulders had rocks at a certain elevation. The idea there was that we would have a flow path for fish of varying swimming abilities to move up through the system at all levels of flow through that complex. And so this is what it looked like when we were back there actually for the site walk. So we talked about removing the dam. What was replaced was this permanent grade control structure. It ended up being cast in place concrete because the sheet pilings would not drive there. There's a notch there where our thaw wag is in our low flow channel. And in the next picture, you can see how that works its way through the complex. But this is several years removed from the installation. I will categorically stop short of calling that a natural looking complex, but it's naturalized, nature based, I guess is what you might consider that to be. But the net of it is, of those cross veins that you see, there's actually another one or two that extend below that water flow. So at lower flows, that complex continues down into the water. And similarly, in Bradford, Rhode Island, different motivating factor here. Same general river complex. The Bradford Mills, you can see in that picture in the top left on the right, something of a dam to speak of, not in particularly great shape, lots of funky things happening there. Not a fire suppression issue. In this case, that dam had been in place so long that there was an extensive wetland complex that had developed around the impoundment upstream. There were some endangered species within that complex, and certainly there was a significant motivation to preserve that. So as with the Kenyon Mills Dam project, the design was to preserve a permanent grade control at the upstream end and build a series of rock ramp fishways, again, working up through there. Our water control was similar, but much larger, more significant river complex with coffer dams to keep the tailwater from coming back into the work area. But again, working through, and the aerials on this one gave us a great perspective on what that design ended up looking like. So as with the previous one, different notches at different elevations, working up through that rock ramp fishway complex. And this was the cover photo for the presentation. But you can see there, we've got that, you can see those start to disappear into the water. The former bypass channel was backfilled. We had large wood placed in, vegetation, and the permanent structures integral to that upstream most weir structure. So in these situations where it could happen even if the dam stays in place, if it's being modified at any particular elevation, but it's all work within the existing river channel. So there's no need for additional property boundaries or limit of work. The mill complex is right there on the right and protected. But it's all working within the river channel to essentially step up and over the dam. Those upstream most ones can also provide some stabilization if the dam's not in particularly good shape. There have been a couple of these constructed where the dam is essentially buttressed by that upstream most weir structure. So it can serve a couple different purposes in applying that. Next one to look at, and I picked the biggest one I could think of, even though smaller versions of this have been done, is a nature-like fish channel that goes around the dam. So this Howland Dam project was part of the Penobscot River Restoration. Got significant funding for 3 major dams, 2 on the main stem of the Penobscot, and this is the merge of the Penobscot where the Piscataquis dumps into the Penobscot. Motivation here was nothing so noble necessarily as endangered species or fire suppression, but simply that if you drive into Howland, you pretty much have the impoundment. So there was while the Great Works and DC dams were removed as part of the Penobscot River Restoration, the town of Howland was very much interested in retaining its dam structure, stabilizing it, and retaining the head pond as part of their town feature recreation. everything of that like. So the red hatching on the left side is where the new channel went when we became involved with the project. Some of the buildings had been removed upstream, but the net of it was for a river of that scale and for the fish passage intent. We're talking Atlantic salmon here, as well as a number of other smaller species. It was a 90,000 cubic yard excavation and stone removal. So by scale, there's about 25 cubic yards in a tractor trailer dump truck that you see on the road. So that was a lot of those. And having some industrial legacy, there's those materials had to be segregated as they came out. 30,000 cubic yards of ledge had to be blasted and removed to get this channel in. So it was a substantial undertaking. And what you can see here is that blasting and ledge removal phase of it. What's left of the mill complex is on the right side with you can see the orange safety fence. That newer concrete that you can barely see is a U-shaped structure. That was because due to the time of year on this project, we needed to allow for downstream fish migration before the channel was online. So there had been gate structures and there was a fish ladder that hung on the side of the dam before we started construction that had to come out. So we had one season of downstream migration that needed to allow for. So that was basically it was the fish chute, and there's some photos of the flow coming out of there where in a good flow condition it was moving pretty well. It was Canopy Lake for fish. And then as that removal progressed, what we got a great shot of here was the progression of the restoration of that channel. So on the right side, we've got everything brought to subgrade. In the middle where the excavator is, there's roughness boulders. And the idea behind those was that within the channel complex, similar to the weir structure and having the gaps set at different elevations, the idea was to model flow paths where the water would be slow enough for even the weakest swimming fish to work their way up through the complex. So those were placed more or less strategically. The intent was to have some adaptive management of the boulders after we had some flows reintroduced. But the boulders were set, and then we had a series of 3 native materials that were blended together to put in about a 6-foot substrate of bottom material, watered together, washed in so that we would get our river flowing on top of the bedding material instead of through it. Rivers don't provide particularly good habitat if the water is flowing below the surface. So had a choked in cobble system and then brought the river online. So we still need to provide access. You can see the Canopy Lake for fish on the right with the downstream migration waterfall coming out of the mill complex. It's still there were still active gates. The whole area, you can see kind of the gray concrete around the historic items that got restored. So the had a vehicular bridge that went across it, but what was phenomenal for all the project partners on this one is when the river went online, you can see this looking upstream. The deepest part of the channel, the low flow channel, is to the left, and then the bench to the right. So river left, but as we're looking at this to the right side of the photo, that bottom elevation slopes gradually up to the right side of the photo. That's 100-foot wide at the bottom, and the idea was that as those flows came up, it would disperse the flow, so we still had passage velocities for the fish. It's all theoretical. For any project like this, just look at general permits and when things get scheduled. You want to be building this when there's no water in the river, but once you're done, you want all the water in the river so you can see if it really works the way you intended. So we were fortunate in this job, actually, from when the river was put back online, that 2 weeks later, we had a monumental storm event. So they were able to monitor the river and its flows as it came up through the full operating capacity of the river. And following that, I think we moved 2 boulders at the upstream end just to allow, there's a couple areas where the things were moving a little too fast. But that's what the end of the completed river looks like. This is entirely new, artificially created nature-like bypass around the Howland Dam. So that's another scenario for managing passage around us. And obviously there needed to have the real estate on one side of the dam for that to occur. So limiting factor and option selection related to that. Columbia Dam which we looked at before as a traditional removal. Independent of that, there were 3 upstream bridges. One of them was Interstate 80, and then there were 2 county bridges upstream of the dam, well up into the impoundment. But in removing that dam, those bridges and their abutments and footers had been engineered around head pond, not flowing river, not water elevations that were going to be lower. So there was a progressive removal of the dam. And in this case, used cross veins to progressively not so much from the standpoint of allowing fish to get up through, but to retain water elevation at the dam structure, at the bridge structures, and provide some scour protection for those bridges as the dam and the river restored itself downstream. So yes, we work in the rivers in this case. So where in this case, and when we do have that equipment on the river, we're using vegetable-based hydraulic fluid in the machine. So if there is any hose leaks or anything like that, we're not putting contaminants into the water column. Rivers are turbid, they move sediment, that's what they do. So that's been part of the education process, certainly through the dam removal movement, and also project by project and regulatory entity by regulatory entity. But the net of it was, you can see some of the turbidity in the river there. By the time it was hitting our turbidity monitors where it entered the Delaware River, we were back to background. Rivers exist because they've moved sediment, and the best background we can take is following any storm event when there's substantially more turbidity and sediment moving through the raw water column than we would create even with this obtrusive in operation. But in this case, it was a series of, we were building these structures in the wet. So we were actually digging out the footing location, setting the boulders, and at the end of the day had a series of cross weirs that under each bridge structure. This is looking up at one of the county bridges. So certainly from a functional standpoint, got to get across the river. From a aesthetic standpoint, it's a pretty nice bridge and a nice one to protect. So I think in this case, there were 3 leading up to this bridge, but there you can see the traditional U-shaped cross vein where it's you have the lower point in the middle and it steers the water towards the middle of the channel, keeps it off the banks and protects the bridge structure. And then if we had time, which it looks like we do, when you can take it out, how long does it really take? Because this does speak to where I see and where I'd like to see, and where watershed groups as a group can potentially take things, is in how little time and how little effort it really takes to take a dam out, and how much of the cost and how much of the energy goes into everything that leads up to it. I often speak about our role in a project as the people that go out there with the equipment and do the work is the equivalent of the existence of humans on Earth. The Earth formed eons and eons and billions of years ago, and that's our organizations like yours that are identifying the obstacles to barriers. It's funding sources that are giving a little bit of money to do feasibility studies. It's engineering firms and design firms that are putting together the plans and getting the permits done. And then humans showed up and we take the thing out. So it's a very short period of time. And I did queue up rather than trying to go through an embedded approach to the, can you see the video screen now? I'm just making sure you've got that. All right. So this is Wapping Road dam removal. And with 1 minute of time and less than a day of work, this is what a dam removal looks like if you haven't seen this before. So while this is running, I'm kind of getting to the point where we could entertain some questions. But that's the gist of a few scenarios, alternatives for getting fish around your dams. But this is all, so this is a time lapse that they did on the Wapping Road project. The entire time lapse was 1 day of real time. So it can happen that fast. And yes, our crews actually do move that fast. Yeah. And I put that link in there. There's a little bit more to the story of the Wapping Road Dam removal. If anybody is interested in seeing that, I shared the presentation with Sarah earlier today. But that's where we're at. So again, I think I could pick 5 or 6 different topics and talk through any manner of things. I think the big thing that we see, and that when I have a soapbox to stand on with EBC or any other organization, is working on things to expedite the process. There's estimates of upwards of 3,000 dams in Massachusetts, 12,000 in New England. DER has been active in advancing that work, but the net of it is 60 dams removed in about 20 years. So at 3 a year, even if we took 10% of the easiest ones in the state, we're talking 300 dams, 100 years to get those out. So I'm all about accelerating the process, finding the opportunities. Invariably, there's some challenging dams that need or could come out, or that need passage provided for any number of reasons. Those are the ones that DER's got to focus on. There's so many more, particularly in looking through OR's website and knowing what I know about the organization through the Technical Advisory Committee. There's the big ones, right? But then there's all those other dams on the tributaries that once, with a watershed approach, if you can take the initiative through project partners and everybody else to get the substantive ones, the significant ones out, it does open up the opportunity to then work towards my dream of a superseding order of conditions, permit by notification, where we can just say, hey, we're going to go take out that dam. Take it. It'll be gone next week. Don't worry about it. So a guy can dream. I think there's some organizations even within ORs that are looking at some opportunities for doing things like that. But the watershed scale approach, working up through the main stem and finding some opportunities through the culverts, through the smaller tributary dams that we could do a lot more, a lot faster. And things like the act that's proposed in the Senate right now in Massachusetts. You talked about the advocacy that ORS does, but S457, something like that, is very much in line with where we'd like to go with this. Just getting the environmental regulations out of the way of doing the things that are restorative. So I'm excited about the time. I think it is a good time for the initiatives that ORS is undertaking and dam removal and passage in general. So again, appreciate the time. It's a great group here, and look forward to continuing the work through the TAC and whatever else comes along in the watersheds.
Great. Thank you so much, Chad. And we're happy to entertain questions. And I think your presentation shows.
That's the presentation. Again, it's available. Happy to cycle back through any of those that we looked at, answer any questions that folks have.
Great. And you can stop sharing if you want, but if you think you may need to go back to some slides, that's fine too. I just wanted to say how this relates so much to our approach, because ORS knows that a free-flowing river is generally a healthy river or stream, but that each dam is its own case, and each dam needs to be understood based on its own circumstances, the community's values, and many other things, often including cost. So what I like here is that we can see that there are different ways to approach it, and we need to always be creative and see if there's not just the most obvious solution, but also other possibilities that may work even better. So I wanted to see if I see hands up. So let me start with Alan and Lisa Fierce, if you would like to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, I just wondered if Chad could tell us a little bit more about what you do with contaminated sediment behind dams that you'd like to remove.
Yeah, those become the complicated ones, right? And the costly ones and everything else. Generally, it's got to get removed. It's got to get removed and managed. Project that I didn't highlight here was out in Pittsfield, and I'll give you one guess as to what the contaminants and the sediments were out there. But yeah, it was in the sediments, and there were varying degrees of concentration. Some of it were below, like not necessarily in the main stem of the channel, but on the banks of once the dam was removed. So that was vegetated and stabilized in place, capped with some soil. But yeah, there's significant water control costs that go into that because you've got to get the water out of the way so it can recover the sediments, got to stabilize the sediments, got to ship them. I think in that case, it was bid with, and it does come down to another issue. I'll speak to it briefly. Had to be shipped ultimately to a landfill. I think that one was in New York, which doesn't sound that far away from Pittsfield, but this particular one was. When they bid the project, there were 4 disposal options that we bid depending on how far the trucking was, and they named those 4 facilities. From the time that it was bid until it was contracted and we started work, 2 of them were at capacity and could no longer accept material, which is the story of sediment disposal in Massachusetts and New England. There's almost no landfill capacity at this point, so it's a real problem. So any opportunity to get those sediments out of the river, do something that's appropriate for on-site disposal, or finding some other daily cover beneficial use option. But yeah, we don't advocate, nor do any of the project partners, letting contaminated material go downstream. But that gets into some of the assessment of what is downstream, what levels there are. There's a whole series of criteria associated. But yeah, very good question. Those make for the more costly projects, no question.
Thank you. Heather Conkerton.
Hi, Chad.
Hi.
I'm wondering, so with some of these dam removals and fishways that have been created, historically, are you seeing historical returns for those fish, and what fish are they targeting? Because one of you said there was Atlantic salmon.
Yes.
That were coming back.
Yep. Yeah. So the Penobscot one is very much Atlantic salmon focused. Atlantic Salmon Federation in Maine in particular has been very active on a number of dam removal projects up there. The Penobscot complex is interesting in that downstream they have a fish elevator where they swim into a tank, and a tank lifts up and they count and segregate this. I don't think they allow the salmon actually to go through that one because they capture them for breeding and release. But they have had tagged salmon. At the bypass channel that we put in, they had the pit tag readers at the downstream end and upstream end, and they identified tagged salmon moving up through the complex. So not on a number standpoint. And then in Town Brook, it's herring, and various other complexes. It's but yeah, I think there's generally the monitoring on that falls beyond us, but as we follow those projects through, again, watershed type situations, it's always what's the next dam, what's the next impediment, and there have been good returns, at least passing what had been getting to that dam historically.
Great. Somebody mysteriously called Oars has their hand up.
Hi, yeah, I have a question from the chat from Melissa, who is asking, rivers eventually make it to the sea, so what analysis is done around the chemical pollutants and potential for increase in plastic reaching the oceans?
That's a very good question. I don't have an answer to that one, I'll be honest with you. Yeah, certainly everything does end up in the sea. I think, certainly the dams, I would say that them as a plastics trap is probably not the most efficient way to deal with plastics entering the ocean, but it is something that, as alluded to in the first question that we posed, what's in the sediment that we're letting go. That is something that's generally characterized pretty carefully before anything is allowed to pass through. But that's not the element of things that we're generally getting into the level of detail on ourselves, other than what needs to be done with the project.
Thank you. And Ben.
Chad, thank you very much. That was really great. Very interesting. Just a comment on the previous question. I think I've heard that there's been an evolution. So not about plastic, but about sediment, uncontaminated sediment. There's been an evolution in DER's thinking, right? To
absolutely
that they were concerned about whether or not to let sediment down, and they've realized that really it if it's not contaminated, then it does wash out very quickly, and the effects are pretty short term. Is that right?
Yeah, I
but
think
the-
Emmett Brook was a pivotal one in their thinking along those lines. That was one of the early ones where they allowed for in-stream sediment management, started calling it in-stream sediment management. Because if you looked at the downstream side of the Amethyst Brook project, the system was so sediment starved. It was basically large boulders and cobbles and very little habitat value there. And yeah, there was an initial slug of sediment, but they were monitoring that extensively over the following years. And not so much that it washed through and out the system, but more just it took on the characteristics of a natural stream bottom because it had that sediment input and that natural flow of sediment through the system. But that was big for DER's progression and really the regulatory entities' understanding of what that looked like.
Yeah. And my question is, can you just explain why the weirs in those in the dams you were showing for Rhode Island, why they're angled upstream?
Yeah, for the Kenyon, I think Kenyon was pretty much straight across, but it was the Bradford Mills one. So let me see if I can go back up to that one. So go to.
It's not intuitive. You would think you would want to angle them downstream, but
the way we had the well, it's not entirely. So let me get that up. So the way river water flows, and I'll do that from the current slide if I can. Is that if water is flowing in this direction, can you see the arrow?
Yes.
Okay, so if the water is flowing in this direction, it flows perpendicular to the structure. So it comes and it turns it towards the middle. So if it's V-shaped, if you're thinking about it in elevation, it's lower in the middle. But if you're thinking about it in plan view, we want the water being turned towards the middle of the channel versus turned towards the bank where it's apt to be erosive. So that's why also on the actually that was earlier was in the these structures as they're facing upstream, see that's like the reverse of that V. So it's the downstream V. So it's lower in the middle. You can see the arms of that cross vein come up out of the water, so that the water's low, the structure's lowest in the middle and the water's in the middle, but you also see those flow paths come across the dam and steer that water towards the middle of the channel away from the bank that we're trying to protect there.
I see. Okay, that's actually new information for me. Is there also something about fish refuge in that design?
Not necessarily in the orientation of that. No, that's strictly flow paths for the water in terms of how it's oriented. Certainly you can see where there's deeper water in the middle, it's going to be faster flowing in the middle, and then as you have some riffling as that structure starts to come out of the water surface elevation, that there's some turning there and potential resting pools, and certainly on the sides of the arm there where there's no flow coming, then that it's primarily a stabilization, a bed and bank stabilization structure.
Okay,
Multiple
thanks.
uses.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Jeff.
Thanks, Allison. Thank you, Chad, for the presentation. And I just want to thank you and point out to everybody that maybe 10 years ago, the ecological restoration industry was not much going on, not much capacity in Massachusetts or New England or beyond. And so, Chad, for you and your team to build Sumco into this highly efficient and talented team is a great benefit to ecological restoration here in Massachusetts and beyond. So thanks for all of that.
Yeah, some of it kind of happened to us, Jeff. We came out of salt marsh restoration when we started the company in 2006 and wanted to get more involved in resource areas beyond the marshes. And so, coined the ecological restoration name with the company, and we kind of feel like the world landed on top of us over the last 5 or 6 years between climate adaptation and nature-based solutions and everything. So it's an exciting time. It's been a
little luck never hurts, but
no, but also great partners. I mean, I think everybody that we find in the partner organizations are very dedicated to the work that's happening. There makes for good partners. There's a lot of different types of construction you can do, and that's not always the case. So we feel pretty fortunate to be where we are.
So my question is, you described how you guys come in typically at the end of a long process of fundraising and permitting and community engagement and design. I wanted to ask you about community engagement. Where have you seen community engagement, community conversation about the future of whatever the waterway is, or the future of that changed landscape, and building comfort around that, because there's obviously recreational, cultural, historical, aesthetic interests that people have in a current state, may not have a background in, or frankly, an interest in ecological restoration. Where have you seen that conversation go well, a community sort of turn and buy into a future they might not be able to picture, and get behind a restoration?
For sure. No, it's a great challenge. And I think, certainly that's our traditional role, is to be the implementers of the end product of that process. We've certainly, I think, certainly in the market right now, with the influx of funding to this and the limited resources that are available at every stage of the project life cycle, from concept development to funding organizations having the project managers to move those funds through existing programs, to engineers to design it, to contractors to build it. So we've really taken some initiative in talking to folks about how to consolidate and streamline that process, whether it's earlier partnering in the project, working through some design development, putting multiple projects into one package where they're close enough to do so. But to the question about the public vision, it's a hard one, and it's a universal to almost every dam removal, because for every advocate, there's somebody that just likes the way the water goes over the waterfall or has a historic connection to it. I think the biggest thing is precedence, which we have now more than we did earlier on. We can say, this looks similar to this. This is what it looked like. These were the concerns we heard. This is the feedback that we got after. There are, I won't say innumerable, because there haven't been that many dam removals yet in the context of what could happen, but it's not uncommon for your most vocal opponents to become either grudgingly or outright proponents of the project after the fact. That dam that used to be there that was needed to come out for any number of reasons, safety, condition, fish passage, whatever it was, and was a nice waterfall, becomes a babbling brook with its own sound and impoundment and walking paths and everything else. So we've had people that adjacent abutters to projects that are we show up on the project after all this work has happened prior to us getting there, and they say, watch out for that person, like, don't talk to, if they approach you, have them call us, like all these kinds of things. And by the end of the job, they've got a barbecue going for the crew. So it is hard, but it's hard to your point, to see something that's been in place as long as anybody's been there and have an idea of what that might look like after the fact. But it's what organizations like yours and project partners that we have are doing ahead of time and laying that groundwork. And if we can give some of these pictures to help them picture what that might look like, then that can only help the cause.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Paul Goldman.
Hi, Chad. Thank you for that presentation. I'm curious about property values of abutters who are either losing a lot of waterfront or maybe losing land because of the water changing course.
Mm-hmm. That's one of those what are we doing kind of things here. I think there's 2 points to that. One is generally they end up with more land because it was an impoundment and now there's dry ground. Not that that's much comfort to them. When they had a pond, they could put a boat in, their dock ends 50 feet from the new river edge. But a lot of that, and I think folks that have to navigate that more than we do would tell you that somebody owns the dam and it's probably not them. So there's I'd be happy to keep this here, but I've got an enforcement order from DCR that says I need to do something about it, and somebody's willing to help me take it out with a grant for $100,000. And if I have to, no cost to me, or I got to repair it for $300,000 and maintain it and do my filings and everything else, if you want to pay for it, come do it. There's any number of things, but yeah, it's certainly another consideration in the context. The Curtis Pond Dam, that was the first one that I showed you for Middleton. Small dam, but there was a big complex there, and there's certainly folks that stood in the way of the permitting process of that dam for a long time. So it's not a take it or leave it kind of situation, because people that are dug in against something can always make things take longer than they should, but that's certainly a real consideration. And but at the end of the day, it's the dam owner that owns the liability, owns the decision on that in many cases. So the hope is that they can help their abutters and folks that are on the dam. And there's certainly situations where there's an entire community built up around an impoundment, and that's where you look at some of these alternative passage options that were shown today. So if there's room to do a bypass, if there's room to if there's capacity within the channel, do a rock ramp fishway. If there's, I didn't get into them because I find them a little bit more conventional, but denial ladders, the fish ladders, they have limited capacity. They're not quite as broadly passing as some of these other more nature-like systems, but there are alternatives for achieving some of the goals without taking the dam out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question from the chat from Bill Maxfield asking, what about dams that generate electricity? There's one in Maynard. I think it's actually in Acton, but near the line.
I heard that generated electricity, but was there a end to that
sorry, no,
question?
just that there's one locally on the Assabet River.
Oh yeah, I was reading about that as well. Generally, those don't come out. We're looking at either, like I said, some of the alternative passage mechanisms for that. One of the discussion points, and there was a fair bit of interest for a period of time, was low head hydro or micro hydro on some of these smaller dams, but the net of the cost to shore up the dam to accommodate that infrastructure, maintain it, and everything from an offset standpoint for the electric that could be generated. In a lot of those cases, the cost benefit didn't play out. It's still certainly something that folks are looking at for some low head hydro. But for the ones that are there, generally, if there's active power generation, by the same token, those 3 Penobscot dams were all hydro dams. And so the ecological environmental benefits outweighed what they were generating in that case, the maintenance, the condition of things. And it's certainly, none of these projects or their intents or their motivations exist in a silo. So it's looking at all those things.
Great. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yep.
Alan and Lisa Fierce. This might be the last question.
Yeah, thanks again, Chad, for this. It's really very, very interesting. So we've heard you talk about how this movement has been growing, ecological restoration. And we've also heard that there's been significant funding available for projects to do this. But I'm wondering if there's actually enough funding to grow this movement to something like double or triple the size that we've got going annually right now. I mean, is there a need for greater funding from government sources for this kind of work?
Well, I think last year we did one in Massachusetts, so we could double that pretty quickly, I think. But they do tend to move in cycles where there's years where their DER is very much focused on getting the next set queued up, and then a bunch of those come through to construction. But to your point, I think my sense is that for where we are right now, it's not so much funding of the projects. For this point in time with the infrastructure funding and how that's supplementing existing programs, it's more the bottleneck of human capital and human resources. DER is still operating at what, 60%, 50% of what their peak staffing had been. So you could put all the money into these programs that you want. If there's no project managers to administer the grants, if there's no regulatory staff to review and issue the permits, if there's no engineers to design. I mean, before infrastructure hit, engineers and construction firms were essentially at max capacity and wondering where they were going to get the workforce to execute even that level of work. So I think the bigger opportunity really for accelerating these things is to streamline any of those bottleneck processes. So how expansive do we need to get with the permitting process? Can we tie some of that together? Can we have some, like the act I mentioned earlier that was in the Senate last I checked, some things that streamline proactive restoration opportunities in a certain set of conditions? Can we say, if the dam is 4 feet or less in an upper watershed with no impounded sediments, history of industrial use, can somebody file an NOI and go take the thing out. I mean, those types of things it's the streamlining of the process. We should not need to incur the evolution of the earth before humans showed up to take a dam out. We can take them out in a day for $20,000, or we can take one out in a day for $40,000, but have to spend $1.5 million on the related infrastructure that goes with manipulating the impoundment that a river's going to do over time anyway. So I really do think it's the process that the opportunity, that's where the efficiency can come from. Funding is always important to make them happen, but if we can cut that funding goes a lot further if it's not expended over eons getting a project to the build stage.
Well, thank you for making that point. I think we're seeing that very much as the project manager for some dam removal projects. The real questions about how can the limited amount of funding go as far as possible. So I'd just like to thank Chad for a wonderful presentation, and for all of you for coming and your questions. And I hope that you will continue to support OARS and our work. As you can see, there's really exciting stuff coming up going forward. And so at this point, I would like to thank our Zoom master, Sarah Kwan, who has been behind the scenes and kept everything flowing smoothly. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Chad. And thank you all. And do I hear a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
I second.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you all, and good night.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you all for the
Thank you,
opportunity. It's great
Chad.
to be with you tonight.